Thank you and good morning. Actually, I've been an Annapolitan since actually the early 1980s, and I have roots in the county here that go back to the 1920s. If you ever get down to Shadyside to the Captain Salem Avery House Museum, there's an exhibit up there now that actually includes my family members going back to the 20s. And of course, as you all know, it was a very, very different place to get around Anne Arundel County. Now I'm here to talk about how we get around today. And I first want to say how much I appreciate how much you all do in the Rotary Club. I'm friends with many people in the audience and am familiar to others as well. And I'm very grateful for all that you do and for sponsoring Matthew, who's very excited about his upcoming trip. And I also want to let you know that my sister is a Rotarian. And I want you to be sure to call your aunt and tell her that I mentioned that she's a Rotarian in Wellington, Florida, and is a realtor. And home prices are really, really depressed down there. It's time to buy a place in Florida. Now, I want to talk about the tremendous, really, really serious challenges ahead of us related to how we will get around. And I rewrote this speech many times because I wanted to figure out, what do Rotary Club members want to hear? What do they need to know about? And I decided that it's about choice, freedom of choice. Freedom of choice about how we transport ourselves. And so there is a question in order, and I'm going to guess the answer. But how many of you here today drove your car? And how many of you today drove alone? Oh, I'm astonished. Imagine that. 21st century, the United States of America, and we all drive these expensive, inefficient, energy-using, air-polluting prisons that we equate with our personal freedom. How might you have gotten here today? Well, were things very, very different? Were this place planned differently and developed differently? Were it more like a European city? Were it more like our older cities? Were it more like Disney World or the Renaissance Festival? You would have gotten around in a very, very different way. Now, I submit to you, enjoy it while you can. The day of the automobile is numbered. Maybe not in 5 years or 10 years, but in the lifetime of many of us in this room. And here's another challenge facing us. Many of us in this room will outlive our own ability to drive our own car. That is a major issue coming down the highway, so to speak. Automobile use is showing signs of decline, whereas public transit use is trending upward year after year after year very strongly all across the country. And if anything at all is being planned to get us out of the economic mess we're in, it is going to be, in all likelihood, massive reinvestment in our transportation infrastructure. And I hope that doesn't mean just concrete. Now, in 1956, President Eisenhower, who as a young soldier in 1919 had crossed the country in a military convoy, it took him, does anyone know how long that trip took him?
2.5 months.
62 days. Then, President Eisenhower saw the Autobahns in Germany, and he had this idea to create the interstate transit system, interstate highway system, right around here. Route 50, Route 97. It's a great thing, isn't it? Whisks us across the country. High rate of speed, right? And it's killing us. And the highways that have increasingly surrounded Annapolis, that in one sense give us great mobility, also have created a barrier around our city. And as we saw earlier this year with that horrific accident on the Bay Bridge, how things backed up and backed up and backed up. What a tremendous, tremendous mess it made. When highway starts to back up in one part of Route 50, the whole city starts to back up. And it will only get worse. Now, this auto-centric lifestyle that is here for us is sort of a love-hate affair. Love my car, I hate traffic. I love being able to get everywhere fast, but I hate all the roads and highways. I hate all the noise, I hate all the air pollution. I hate what it costs me, but I love the freedom, I love the mobility. What we're really saying is, we're forced to drive. So it's an arranged marriage. And my advice is get a divorce. As soon as you can. Now, 5 years after the interstate highway system was born, the young successor to Dwight Eisenhower spoke to the nation. I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth. I hope the accent didn't give it away. Now, on a hot July night, just 8 years later, I was on my parents' bed watching Neil Armstrong land on the moon. We did it. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Okay, that didn't give it away. So, here's the killer question. In 1969, if we could land a man on the moon, how come my wife can't take a commuter bus to Baltimore? What is wrong with us? Why don't we have a rail link to Baltimore? Why don't we have a rail link to Washington? We built 17 miles of Route 97 at a cost of $450 million, and it's a great road. But why did we only get a road? Why do we have a barely adequate, perpetually underfunded, and mismanaged local bus system? My wife's situation is made all the more ironic by the fact that she works in the old Mount Royal train station. Her desk is but 50 feet away from a rail line. Her office is a 2-minute walk from the Light Rail Operations Center. Yet she has to drive to Baltimore. Not to mention, it's a state system that operates. We're the state capital. We're a wealthy state. We're a densely populated urban state. Yet the state can't manage to send a commuter bus from the state capital to its largest city 20 miles away. But boy, can we build garages. Yet this place was the birthplace of the modern railroad. The B&O, the first electric trains, the Tom Thumb, and by the way, a horse beat the first train. Remember, the horse actually beat Tom Thumb. We had rail here until 1950. We had ferry boat service throughout the bay until the 1930s. We had a ferry across the bay to Mattapique until 1952, and then we built a bridge. We built a bridge. All our problems will be solved. We have a bridge. 20 years later, well, we better open another bridge. All our problems will be solved. We have 2 bridges. And now, what do we keep hearing about? We need a 3rd bridge. Why not just pave the bay? Why not? Because if we look back, we'll say we'll build another bridge, and that will be overcrowded, and we'll build another bridge, except We don't have the cheap oil like we used to have. Unless there's going to be a magic bullet to power it, to power all these cars, peak oil, and the increasing difficulty and cost of getting oil, transporting it, refining it, storing it from increasingly unfriendly countries that we then have to spend billions and billions of dollars to police. Don't count on it. Now I know you'll say, well, oil prices have dropped way down. They shot up, they shot down. Nothing will keep them from shooting back up again. And I can tell you this, there's one thing I learned in high school biology, they're not making any more dead dinosaurs. We're gonna run out. Now my wife's employer spends all kinds of money to give her free parking. Free parking, okay? There is no such thing as free parking, okay? But her school will not lift a finger to create a free ride-sharing program for its employees. Something's wrong here. Arranged marriage. We're forced to drive. Now, what does the state do? We're cutting budgets right and left. We're cutting our bus services right and left. We lost the commuter express bus to Baltimore to save money, save $300,000 a year, big deal. We're about to lose the 921 bus route to New Carrollton. About to lose it. Let's cut bus routes, cut bus routes, cut bus routes. We'll build the highways. We'll build rail systems. But then we'll tell you you can't put a bus on the highway and you can't link to the rail system. It gets worse. What happened up at BWI Airport? We bulldozed the Department of Transportation building, and in its place, we put a massive garage. We moved the DOT to undeveloped land, tore that up, and it's no longer accessible by transit. And the odd thing is, even when you park in that brand new, fancy, high-tech garage, you still arrive at the airport in a bus. I'm not going to take a bus to the airport. I'm going to drive and I'm going to park. But I'm going to take a bus to get to the airport. Anyhow, how many of you know you can take a bus from Annapolis to the airport? It's $3.50, $4. It's 38, 39 minutes. Problem is, it starts at 7 in the morning, ends at 7 at night, only goes every 2 hours. So unless you've got hours and hours and hours to spare, you take the car. So then you get in the car, you fight all the traffic, and as more and more people do it, there's more and more traffic, and then we've got to build more and more roads. We build more and more roads, we get more and more congested. Then we have to look around, where did all these people come from? Where did all the traffic come from? Yet what we continue to do is take President Eisenhower's 1950s solutions and impose them on all of us in the 21st century. Now, we've all heard of the information superhighway. Can you imagine if you tried to have the information superhighway on the punch card IBM computers of the 1950s? That's what we're planning for our future, using outmoded technology, outmoded planning, outmoded engineering, outmoded use of energy that is killing us and potentially causing a global climate catastrophe. Spending more and more of our money, spending more and more of our time in our cars, driving further and further to go to our jobs so we can spend more and more of our personal income on our cars and on our homes that are further out, that make us drive further and build more roads and spend more time in traffic, so we have less time in our homes, so we're working all the time to spend all our money just to get to work and leave our home because we only have time to go to our homes to sleep, and we call it freedom. We call it freedom. There's an excellent documentary made about this dilemma called Driven to Despair. I want you to write that down. You can look it up on YouTube or at pbs.org. Driven to Despair. It talks about how exurbanization and suburbanization, coupled with a mortgage crisis, coupled with fuel cost, coupled with driving time, is killing millions and millions and millions of Americans in the suburbs. Now, it cost over $20,000 to build a parking space. Then you gotta salt it, sand it, scrape it, plow it, paint it, light it, patrol it, secure it, do everything else, pick up the trash, what have you. That costs $1,000 a year or more. So we're okay building garages and garages and garages, but we're not okay building systems that will make the garages unnecessary. And by the way, you just add a little B in the word garage and you end up with garbage. And this is what we're doing to our lovely state capital. We're building more and more garages. Heard of the Knighton garage, right? How much money did it lose last year? Why did the Knighton garage lose money? Well, what do all these people have to come and park in the Knighton garage for if they come to a city and all that's there are more garages? We take the most beautiful, probably most valuable real estate in all of Anne Arundel County. We call it City Dock, and what do we use it for? Parking. Something wrong with that. And by allowing all that parking downtown, what do? We bring in more and more and more cars. Yet, I ask you, while it may have been a car that gets you to a shopping center, that gets you to downtown, with the possible exception of some pharmacies or drive-through banks, do you drive your car into the store to effect a commercial transaction? I hope not. But the reason we invented cities was to effect the exchange of goods and services. The best way to do that is by walking, is by face-to-face. We're making it harder and harder and harder in Annapolis to do that, to try to compete with this, whatever you want to call it out here in Parole, which, by the way, is not multimodal or intermodal whatsoever. It could have been a great transportation hub, yet it didn't happen. So we build more garages, we spend more money on our garages, we lose money on them. What good does it do? So we plan. We have small area plans, we have comprehensive plans, we have general development plans, we have plans, and what do we end up with? We end up with the mess we're in. Now, if you drive, as I do, from Eastport up Hilltop Lane, it's a nice bike lane on Hilltop Lane. I use it, but it ends. It just ends abruptly, and then it's anybody's guess. You come to the intersection at Hilltop and Forest. How many have been there, right? How many have been in accidents there? How many know people who've been in accidents there? How many people know people who died because of accidents there? Okay? You think that's bad? Continue on to Forest and Chinquapin. What a disaster! You think that's bad? Try to figure out the intersection right down the street. Thank you, Steve laughed. How many know what I'm talking about? Riva Road in Aris T. Allen. That did not come about in spite of planning. It came about because of planning. And they ask us to get more involved with their planning bureaucracies to plan more and more and more of this. And guess what they have in store for us?
Circles.
More roads, more highways, more cars, more 1950s solutions imposed on our future. Annapolis does not have a parking problem. Newsflash, parking problem solved. Transportation consultant speaks to Rotary Club, says transportation problem solved. Oh, I meant to say parking problem. Oh, we don't have a parking problem. We have a transportation challenge. If we always frame the problem in Annapolis as a parking problem, there's only one solution. Build more $20,000 a space parking garages. You'll solve the parking problem. But when you frame it, when you make the paradigm shift and you frame it as a transportation challenge You then have many, many, many possible solutions to deal with it. Yet name me one mayor who will ever say, we must decrease parking availability in Annapolis. We must make it harder to park in Annapolis. Nobody wants to do it. We cannot build ourselves out of this congestion. It will not work. So we glorify our cars, but remember, not everybody can drive in a car. Some are too young, too old, too infirm. Cars don't work for everybody. And so I envision a future where we have choices, where it's more like Main Street USA and Disneyland. And why do we like it? We like it because there's no cars. Why do we like the Renaissance Festival so much? Because once you forget the parking space and the incredible congestion to get there, you are in a walled area where there are no cars. And everyone's walking and doing things and seeing things and being a city. Walking is our legacy. Walking is what spread humanity across the planet. Walking is what allowed us to walk behind a horse and plow and create agriculture. Neil Armstrong did not, well, actually, he may have driven a vehicle of some sort on the moon. But in order to get on the moon itself, he had to walk. One small step for man. Now, was anyone outside on Christmas Day? Boy, was it nice. What was so nice about it? No cars. It was quiet. It was serene. It was peaceful. You could walk without fear of getting run over. It was so much quieter. If you missed it, you get a chance Thursday morning. Same thing on New Year's Day. Quiet, peaceful. We like that. And if we like it, we're going to have to start making choices in our own lives to use our cars less. Because this arranged marriage is coming to an end whether we want to have a divorce or not. Days are numbered of the automobile age. What will take its place is up to us and how we get around by making our own personal choices writ large, which will have major choices socially. I think it's what we have to consider doing. And by the way, not only did we land a man on the moon, the United States during the height of the Cold War took a spaceship, sent it to outer space. The Russians, at the height of the Cold War, did the same thing. They linked up in outer space. Astronauts shook hands, Russians, Americans, at the height of the Cold War. So when will the county executive and the mayor talk about regional transportation and planning? That's another great, great irony that we can't develop any regionalism here. And that's holding us back. So there'll be some discomfort. The change is coming. I ask you to get involved, get educated, learn about how to get around, consider the true costs of driving, consider what's going to happen when oil goes back up to $150 and more a barrel. It may be one small step for you. It may be a giant leap for mankind to move out of the automobile age and into the next age of real personal mobility and transportation freedom. And now it will be my pleasure to make up any answers to any questions you might have.
Paul, we had the developers of Park Place here a couple of years ago, and they talked about part of the agreement with the city was that they would have a minibus route that they would support and fund. Has that come about? Is that working, do you know?
You can barely see them.
What?
You can barely see them.
Okay.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
I know what the irony of that is we have the smart growth governor, and he could not make any smart growth happen there. We had so much argument and hassle about that over years and years and years, and nothing is going to work. You know, where would it go? Well, it would have to cross city lines to be of any use. It would take that regional cooperation. They talked to the transportation department in the city about running some sort of shuttle, but you have to have modes, you have to have hubs, you have to have links, you have to have reasons for people to want to go from A to B and make it work. And I remember speaking to the one transportation planner for the entire county as this was happening years ago, and he told me, nobody said a word to me about any kind of transportation improvements. So the answer is, well, now I read in the newspaper that the city's economic development guys, he's going to talk to the transportation department about running something. And I write a blog every day about Annapolis, and I said, well, that's ridiculous. You know, they talk to each other all the time. They don't make it happen. And the malls do not really want public transit. If they did, they would be designed differently. And the buses would let you off at the main entrances to the malls. And they'd welcome you. But I can tell you from great personal experience, with the exception of the Harbor Center, where I had some personal connections, that welcomed the buses to come into the Harbor Center and stop at Whole Foods and stop at Office Depot and worked with us on it. No other mall really wants buses. Now they'll spend hundreds of millions on garages. And here's an assignment for every one of you. Go to Westfield Mall and attempt to walk to the movie theater and restaurant entrance. Attempt it. And look around and see how they've designed it every possible way to mess you up, to hurt you, to make you a second-class citizen. If you walk in Annapolis, and if you ride your bike in Annapolis, you are a second-class citizen, and you do it at your own personal danger to ride a bike. So that's sort of my long-winded answer, which is no. They haven't done anything as far as I know. Yes, Steve?
I like the following little math comparison. If I'm in my car, I need, and I observe 2-second following distance, I need about 100 lane feet of highway, as I make my trip. Somebody in a bus with 20 other passengers needs about 5 lane feet of highway per passenger. It is, just because of that simple math, it is impossible for any urban area to increase the supply of lane feet for cars at the same rate that we as a society increase the demand for lane feet by increasing the number of travelers and the number of motorists. It is, those who cannot do math cannot see the future, and those who cannot see the future are going to mess it up. We need to start doing our math about how much lane feet we consume when we're a car-only society and step back and say, we need a broader palette to choose from. I
would agree, and I think it's coming, like it or not. I think that the multiple economic and environmental and social and land use constraints are coming together, that it's going to be forced upon us, and we have to decide whether we're going to do it intelligently and sensibly of our own free will, or we're going to have it forced upon us. Yes, in the back. Yes, please.
In England, where gas is probably $8 a gallon,
okay.
We've seen a decrease in the availability of local train stops. We've seen the resurgence of motorways choked with cars. So I'm wondering how that stacks up to the logic that you're...
Well, what little bit I know about that, and I did ride Brit Rail, and the conductor said, I apologize for the lousy conditions on the train. It's all due to budget cuts. I think the answer is, was a conservative government for many, many years did everything it could to emasculate Brit Rail. That's from what I understand. I'm not the best person to answer that, but I can tell you in this country, we're seeing transit trips go up and up and up, and automobile trips go down and down and down. But I can also provide you other examples throughout Europe of how, for example, London has congestion pricing. Paris has congestion pricing. Paris and other French cities are making thousands, not dozens, but thousands and thousands of bicycles available throughout the city. And I think most people's experience with the European cities would suggest that they get it, they've gotten it, they've had to do it, and they're better at it. It's an excellent question, and I don't think I can address it directly, though. But I think one thing's for sure, we will see oil go up and up and up in the near and the long term, permanently.
Don.
Hi, I actually live in town, and there are some things that I'd like to say. I appreciate what you're saying, and I think a lot of us and most of us agree, and we need to agree with what you're saying. But there are some fundamental shifts in our culture that we need to address at the very lowest level. And I have to commend Alderman Classy Hoyle for pushing for sidewalks in parole. I mean, that's very fundamental. It gets people walking, it gets people walking safely to the places where they need to go for groceries and the sustenance for their daily life. And I know in my ward, in Ward 1, we pushed for that with our aldermen so that we could have sidewalks so I could walk from my home in Murray Hill to the stadium so I could park cars. So there's about a 100-yard stretch where there's not sidewalks, but safety's an issue. And I think we have to have solutions. We can't just talk about the problem. We have to have solutions. We need a train to Washington. We need a train to Baltimore. Why don't they extend the metro from Carrollton to at least Bowie, if not Annapolis? And I also understand that there are only 2 state capitals in the United States that don't have rail service, Honolulu and our wonderful city of Annapolis. So I love what you're saying, but I'd really like to hear some solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think I'm offering an awful lot of solutions, an awful lot. And my own life, the way I live, is offering a solution. In that I walk, I ride, I carpool.
But what can we do?
Sorry?
We need to know what we can do to affect.
Well, I think the first thing you need to do is take an inventory of how you get around and what it really costs. And think about all your options and all your alternatives. I salute you for living and working in the same place. There are, we were at a party in Baltimore the other night and met a fellow who works at the DNR in Annapolis. I said, well, why don't we just switch homes? And, but I want to address about rail for a minute. The problem with trying to build rail here is that the city will have about zero say in it. Because even if there is a rail link, it'll come into the city this much. Okay? But it'll go outside of the city this much. And I will tell you that it will cost minimum, okay, $50 million a mile. Okay? Now, you give me $5 million, and in 1 year, I can have articulated bus rapid transit running every 15 minutes from here to Washington and here to Baltimore. But what can we do when our elected officials are cutting that tiny amount of commuter service we have in the first place and telling us you must drive? So I think you're doing the right thing. You're living where you work. Now that's not easy for everybody. It's a massive change in your life to do it. But if you can do it, you will save money and you'll be a happier person, I think.
We're slightly over time. One more question, please.
Donna asked what we can individually do to help, and I would submit that the one thing we can do is change our way of thinking about the cost of rail travel. It can never pay for itself. It will have to be subsidized, and every other country in the world who has a good train system subsidizes it. You need a minimum ridership in order to make it a business proposition, and that's not what we need.
Well, I have to rebut that if I may. First of all, one of the most conservative Americans in history, Wendell Cox, just passed away. He was an outspoken proponent of rail because he believed it was good for America. Now, let me ask you a question. Is your car not subsidized?
Yeah.
Your car is heavily, heavily, heavily subsidized. I would agree with you, except twisted a little bit. We need to start thinking about how much the car is subsidized. And when we see that, 18 cents a gallon for your highway taxes, and they want to raise it, by the way. Congressman Oberstar is talking about raising it now. You want to talk about highway deaths, you want to talk about air pollution, you want to talk about water pollution, you want to talk about increased costs of transporting our food because we pushed farms and farms further out. You want to talk about global warming, you want to talk about what it cost us to bring all this oil here. I could go on and on and on. It probably costs you $100 a mile to drive your car. So rail sounds pretty cheap compared to that, subsidized or not.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you very much.
In honor of your speech here, we'd like to present you with a certificate of appreciation. And Tremendous, Maryland, we plant a tree in honor of our speakers at Rowe Elementary School. Thank you very much for coming. We also have a Rotary mug for you, which has the four-way test on the back. And you get to cheat. Please stand and join me in the four-way test, folks.